The night was cold and quiet. A thin fog rolled in from the ocean, curling around the empty streets of a small coastal town. Most of the shops were dark. Only the neon sign of a diner buzzed in the distance, its red light flickering like it was tired of staying awake. Tom, the night cook, was wiping down the counter when he heard it. At first it was faint, a low hum like a far-off engine. It grew louder, steady, smooth, and old-fashioned. Not the sound of a modern car. This was deeper, heavier, the kind of sound you felt in your chest. He stepped outside, rubbing his arms against the cold. The street was empty. The fog made it hard to see more than a few yards ahead. Then, through the mist, two bright headlights appeared. They cut through the fog like knives. The shape behind them was long and low, with the sharp lines of a car built decades ago. The car rolled slowly toward the diner. Its chrome bumper caught the glow of the streetlight. The paint was dark, maybe black, maybe deep green, but it was hard to tell under the fog. The engine purred, smooth and steady. It was beautiful. It was perfect. But something was wrong. As the car passed under the streetlight, Tom's eyes went straight to the driver's seat. It was empty. No driver, no passenger, just the wheel turning on its own, the pedals moving like invisible feet were pressing them. Tom froze. The car didn't slow down. It rolled past the diner and kept going, heading toward the edge of town. The sound of the engine faded into the fog until there was nothing left but silence. He stood there for a long moment, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe someone was crouched low in the seat. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. The next night it happened again. Same time, same sound, same car. This time, Tom decided to follow. He grabbed his jacket and stepped into the cold. The fog was thicker tonight, clinging to the ground like it didn't want to let go. The headlights appeared again, glowing in the mist. The car rolled past him, silent, except for the hum of the engine. Tom kept his distance, walking quickly but quietly. The car turned down a narrow road that led to the old shipyard. The shipyard had been closed for years. The gates were rusted shut. No one went there anymore. The car stopped in front of the gates. Its headlights stayed on, shining against the metal bars. Tom hid behind a stack of wooden crates, watching. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the engine cut off. The headlights went dark. The car just sat there, silent and still. Tom waited. 5 minutes passed. 10, 15. The car didn't move. Finally, he stepped out from behind the crates. The air smelled faintly of salt and oil. He walked slowly toward the car, his shoes crunching on the gravel. When he reached the driver's side, he looked in. The seat was empty. The keys were still in the ignition. And on the passenger seat was a single object, a small, sealed envelope, yellowed with age. Tom picked it up. His hands shook as he turned it over. There was no name, no address, just a date written in faded ink, August 23rd, 1974. He looked back at the shipyard gates. The fog swirled around them like it was alive. Somewhere deep inside, a faint metallic sound echoed, like chains moving or a door creaking open. Tom's heart pounded. He didn't know why, but he felt like he wasn't supposed to be here, like the air itself was warning him to leave. He slipped the envelope into his jacket and backed away from the car. The fog seemed to follow him, curling around his legs, tugging at his sleeves. When he reached the diner, he locked the door behind him and sat at the counter, staring at the envelope. He didn't open it. Not yet, because somehow he knew. Whatever was inside would change everything. The night air was heavy with the kind of silence that makes every sound feel louder than it should be. The small coastal town lay still under a blanket of fog that drifted in from the ocean, swallowing the streets and softening the glow of the few streetlights that still worked. The diner at the corner was one of the only places awake, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the mist, casting a tired red light across the wet pavement inside Tom. The night cook moved slowly behind the counter, wiping it down more out of habit than need, his eyes half on the clock, half on the empty booths. That was when he heard it, a low hum at first, so faint he thought it might be the refrigerator in the back, but it grew deeper, steadier and older in tone. Not the sharp whine of a modern engine, but the slow, confident purr of something built in another time, the kind of sound that carried weight and history. Tom stepped outside, the cold biting at his skin, the fog curling around his legs. The street was empty, but the sound was coming closer. Through the mist, two bright headlights appeared, cutting through the fog like twin blades. The shape behind them was long and low, the kind of silhouette you only saw in old photographs or at car shows. The chrome caught the dim light, and for a moment it looked almost alive. The paint was dark, maybe black, maybe deep green, but the fog made it impossible to tell. The car rolled toward him, smooth and unhurried, the engine a steady heartbeat in the quiet night. As it passed under the streetlight, Tom's eyes locked on the driver's seat and his breath caught. It was empty. No driver. No passenger. The wheel turned on its own. The pedals moved as if pressed by invisible feet. The car did not slow it. Glided past the diner and disappeared into the fog, the sound fading until there was nothing but the hum still echoing in his chest. The next night it happened again. Same time, same sound, same car this time. Tom was ready. He stepped outside before the headlights appeared, his jacket pulled tight against the cold. The fog was thicker tonight, clinging to the ground like it didn't want to let go. The car emerged from the mist, its headlights glowing like eyes in the dark. Tom's pulse quickened. He waited until it passed, then began to follow, keeping his distance. The car turned down a narrow road leading to the old shipyard, a place that had been closed for years. The gates rusted shut, the buildings inside, nothing but shadows. The car stopped in front of the gates, its headlights shining against the metal bars. Then the engine cut off, the lights went dark, and the car sat there silent and still. Tom hid behind a stack of wooden crates, watching the minutes pass. The air smelled faintly of salt and oil. The fog swirled around the gates like it was alive. Finally, he stepped out from his hiding place, moving slowly toward the car, his shoes crunching on the gravel. When he reached the driver's side, he looked in. The seat was empty. The keys still in the ignition, and on the passenger seat lay a single envelope yellowed with age. He picked it up, his hands trembling. The paper felt fragile, like it might crumble if he held it too tightly. There was no name, no address, only a date written in faded ink. August 23rd, 1974. He looked back at the gates and thought he saw movement deep inside the shipyard. A faint metallic sound echoed through the fog, like chains shifting or a door creaking open. A chill ran through him, not from the cold, but from something older and heavier, something that felt wrong. He slipped the envelope into his jacket and backed away. The fog seemed to follow, curling around his legs, tugging at his sleeves. When he reached the diner, he locked the door behind him and sat at the counter, staring at the envelope. He did not open it, not yet, because somehow he knew whatever was inside would change everything. The hours crawled by the envelope sitting on the counter, like it was watching him. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the faint hiss of the neon sign outside all seemed louder. Now he thought about the date over and over. August 23rd, 1974. What could it mean? Why would a driverless car deliver it to him? And why here in this forgotten town? By the time the sun began to rise, the fog had thinned, but the questions had only grown heavier. Tom slipped the envelope into his pocket and stepped outside. The streets were empty, the ocean air sharp in his lungs. He looked toward the road that led to the shipyard and felt the pull of something he could not name. He knew he would go back tonight. The day dragged on with a strange heaviness, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Tom went through the motions at the diner, pouring coffee, flipping eggs, wiping counters. But his mind was somewhere else. The envelope sat in his jacket pocket like a weight pulling at him. Every time he moved, he had not opened it. He told himself he was waiting for the right moment. but deep down, he knew it was fear, not patience, that kept it sealed.
By late afternoon, the fog began to creep back in from the ocean, rolling over the streets in slow waves. The light from the setting sun turned it a pale gold for a moment before it thickened into the same cold grey as the night before. Tom stood outside the diner, staring down the road toward the shipyard. He could hear the faint cry of gulls somewhere beyond the mist and the distant crash of waves against the rocks. When the hum came, it was softer than he remembered, almost hesitant, but it grew with each passing second until the familiar glow of headlights cut through the fog. The car emerged just as it had before long. Low, dark, and impossibly smooth in its movement, Tom stepped into the street, this time not to follow on foot but to block its path. The car slowed to a crawl, stopping just a few feet away, the engine idling steady and calm. Tom moved to the driver's side. The seat was empty again. The keys in the ignition unmoving, he reached in and turned the engine off. The silence that followed was thick, almost unnatural. He slid into the seat, the leather cold under him, the smell of old oil and faint salt water filling his nose. He gripped the wheel, half expecting it to resist, but it stayed still under his hands. He started the engine again, the purr returning like a heartbeat. He put the car in gear and eased it forward, the fog swallowing the road ahead. The shipyard gates loomed out of the mist sooner than he expected, the rusted metal bars streaked with years of salt and rain. He stopped the car and stepped out the air. Here was colder, sharper, the sound of the ocean louder. The gates were chained shut, but the lock hung open as if waiting for him. He pushed them apart, the hinges groaning in protest. The fog inside was thicker, the outlines of abandoned warehouses barely visible. He drove slowly, the tires crunching over gravel and broken glass. The buildings rose around him like silent giants, their windows dark and empty. He stopped in front of the largest warehouse, its doors slightly ajar. He stepped out, the fog curling around his legs as he pushed the doors open. The darkness inside was almost complete. The faint light from outside barely reaching the far corners. The air smelled of rust and damp wood. Somewhere in the shadows, water dripped steadily into a puddle, the sound echoing in the emptiness. Tom's eyes adjusted slowly. Shapes began to emerge, stacks of crates covered in dust, old machinery, silent and still, and in the center of the floor, a single object under a heavy tarp. He walked toward it. Each step echoing in the vast space, he reached out and pulled the tarp away. Beneath it was another car, older than the one outside, its paint faded, its chrome dull, but its shape unmistakable. It was the same model, the same make, but this one was broken. Its tires flat, its windshield cracked, the driver's seat torn and empty. On the dashboard lay another envelope, this one thicker than the first, tied with a thin piece of twine. Tom picked it up, the paper rough under his fingers. He untied the twine and slid out a stack of photographs. The first showed the car outside the diner, but the diner looked different, newer. The neon sign bright and clean. The second photo showed the same car parked in front of the shipyard gates, but the gates were freshly painted. The third photo made his breath catch. It was a picture of him standing outside the diner, wearing the same jacket he wore, now the same expression on his face. But the photo was faded and yellowed like it had been taken decades ago. A sound came from the far end of the warehouse, a slow, deliberate scrape like metal against concrete. Tom turned. The fog inside the building seemed to shift, something moving within it. He took a step back, the photograph still in his hand. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by the faint hum of an engine, but it was not coming from outside, it was coming from the darkness ahead. The hum grew louder, the fog thickened, and from the shadows, two headlights flared to life. The headlights burned through the darkness inside the warehouse, casting long, pale beams that cut across the dust and fog. The hum of the engine was low and steady, but it carried a strange vibration that Tom could feel in his chest. He took a step back, his boots scraping against the concrete, the sound echoing in the vast empty space. The fog inside seemed to shift and curl, as if it was being pulled toward the light. The shape of the car emerged slowly from the shadows, its body glistening faintly as though it had just come from rain. Though the air in here was dry, it was the same model again, identical to the one outside and the broken one under the tarp, but this one looked untouched, perfect. The chrome flawless, the paint deep and dark, the tires clean as if they had never touched the road. The car rolled forward without a driver, the wheel turning on its own, the pedals pressing down in smooth, measured movements. Tom's breath quickened. He stepped to the side, letting it pass the hum filling the space around him. The car stopped beside the broken one. The headlights dimmed but did not go out. The engine idled like a slow heartbeat. Tom's eyes were drawn to the back seat, where something lay wrapped in a thin grey cloth. He moved closer. The cloth was damp and smelled faintly of the ocean. He reached out and pulled it back, revealing a small wooden box. The wood was dark and worn. The edges chipped as if it had been handled many times over the years. Carved into the lid was the same date from the envelope, August 23, 1974. He lifted the box. It was heavier than it looked, the weight uneven, as though something inside shifted. When he moved it, he set it on the hood of the broken car and opened it slowly. Inside was a collection of objects. A rusted key, a silver pocket watch stopped at exactly midnight, a strip of black and white film negatives, curled and brittle, and at the bottom a folded piece of paper. Tom unfolded it, the paper crackling in his hands. The handwriting was neat, but faded. It read simply, "You were there. You saw it happen. You cannot change it, but you must finish it before it finishes you." A sudden metallic slam echoed through the warehouse, the sound of a door being forced shut. Tom spun around. The main doors were closed, the thin line of light from outside gone. The fog inside thickened, pressing in on him. The hum of the engine grew louder, deeper, almost angry. The headlights of the perfect car flared bright, blinding him for a moment. When his vision cleared, the driver's seat was no longer empty. A figure sat there still and silent, its face hidden in shadow. The hands on the wheel, pale and unmoving. The figure turned its head slowly toward him. Though Tom could not see its eyes, he felt the weight of its gaze like cold metal against his skin. The engine roared, the sound bouncing off the walls. The figure's hands tightened on the wheel. The car lurched forward toward the far end of the warehouse, where a set of massive sliding doors stood closed. The metal rattled as the car approached, and without slowing, it passed straight through them as if the steel was nothing but smoke. Tom stood frozen, the fog curling around his legs, the box still open on the hood. The objects inside unmoved, the sound of the engine fading into the distance, replaced by the slow, steady drip of water somewhere in the dark. He looked toward the sliding doors. They were still shut, solid and rusted as they had been before. Then from behind him came the faint sound of footsteps, deliberate and slow, each one echoing in the emptiness. He turned, but the fog was too thick to see more than a few feet ahead. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than before, and in it, Tom heard something else, a whisper so faint he could not tell if it was in the air or in his head. It said his name. The whisper slid through the fog like a thread of ice, curling into Tom's ears and sinking into his chest. His name drawn out, slow and deliberate, as if whoever spoke it wanted to taste each sound. He turned in a slow circle, the dim light from the broken windows barely touching the swirling grey around him. The footsteps began again, soft but certain, moving closer, though he could see nothing. The air felt heavier now, pressing against his skin, the smell of salt and rust, sharper than before. He backed toward the broken car. The box still open on its hood, the objects inside unmoved, the photographs lying where he had left them. The whisper came again, this time closer and clearer. His name followed by a single word, "Come." Tom's pulse hammered in his ears. He reached for the box, but before his fingers touched it, the fog between the two cars began to twist and rise, forming a shape tall and thin, its edges shifting like smoke. The shape leaned forward, and though it had no face, He felt its gaze, the same cold weight he had felt from the figure in the perfect car. The hum of an engine rolled through the warehouse again, but it was not coming from either car. This time it came from somewhere deep below the floor, a low vibration that made the concrete tremble faintly. The shape stepped back into the fog and was gone, leaving only the sound behind. Tom looked toward the far wall where a section of the floor was darker, almost wet. He moved toward it, each step slow, the sound growing louder. The floor there was made of old wooden planks, unlike the rest of the concrete. He knelt and pressed his hand to it. The wood was cold, damp, and faintly vibrating. He found a metal ring set into one of the boards and pulled the plank, lifting with a groan of rusted hinges. Beneath was a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The hum was stronger here, the air warmer and thicker, carrying the faint scent of oil and seawater. He hesitated at the top of the stairs, the fog behind him shifting as if waiting. Then he began to descend the steps, creaking under his weight, the darkness swallowing him with each step until the faint light from above was gone. At the bottom, he found a long tunnel, the walls lined with corroded metal pipes, water dripping steadily from somewhere overhead. The hum echoed through the space, vibrating in the walls. The tunnel sloped downward, leading deeper under the shipyard. He followed it, his footsteps muffled by the damp floor, the air growing warmer with each step. After what felt like minutes, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber dimly lit by a row of flickering bulbs strung along the ceiling. In the center sat another car, identical to the others, but this one was surrounded by shallow water, the surface rippling gently as if something moved beneath it. The car's headlights were off, but the hum came from it, steady and deep. Tom stepped into the water, wading toward it, the cold biting at his legs, the ripples spreading out from him. The closer he got, the stronger the vibration became, until it felt like it was inside his bones. He reached the driver's side and looked in. The seat was empty, but on the passenger seat lay a third envelope, this one black, sealed with red wax. He picked it up, the wax warm under his fingers as if it had just been pressed into place. He broke the seal and unfolded the paper. Inside, the handwriting was the same as before, but the message was longer. It read, "You have taken the first steps, you cannot turn back. Now the road will close behind you, and the night will not end until the truth is seen." Before he could read further, the water around the car began to churn violently, the hum rising into a roar. The bulbs overhead flickered and went out, plunging the chamber into darkness, and in that darkness something moved fast and close, sending a wave of cold water against him. The water surged around Tom in the pitch black, the roar of the unseen engine shaking the chamber as if the walls themselves were alive. Something brushed past his leg, fast and strong, sending a shock of cold through him. He stumbled back, his boots slipping on the slick floor, the black envelope still clutched in his hand. The hum rose higher until it became a sharp vibration in his skull, and then without warning the headlights of the car blazed to life. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the water now swirling in a slow spiral toward the center of the chamber where the car sat, unmoving. The ripples pulling at his legs, urging him closer. The driver's seat was no longer empty. The same shadowed figure sat there, its head tilted slightly as if listening to something. Only it could hear the hands on the wheel turned slowly, though the car did not move. Tom felt the pull in his chest, stronger than fear, stronger than reason. He stepped forward, the water rising to his knees. The figure raised one pale hand and pointed toward the passenger seat where the black envelope had been replaced by the small wooden box from before the lid. Now open inside, the rusted key, the pocket watch and the strip of film were gone, replaced by a single photograph. He waded closer. The photograph showing the shipyard bathed in daylight, but the buildings were whole, the gates freshly painted, and in the foreground stood a younger version of himself, his hand resting on the hood of the perfect car behind him, a crowd of people, their faces blurred, as if the image refused to hold them clearly. The figure in the driver's seat turned its head toward him, and for the first time he saw its face. It was his own, but older. The eyes darker, the skin lined with years he had not yet lived. The older version of himself spoke without moving its lips, the voice filling the chamber like the hum of the engine. "You were there. You will be there. You cannot leave until it is done." The water surged higher now at his waist, the spiral tightening the car beginning to sink slowly into the center of the chamber. The older version of himself still staring unblinking. Tom felt the photograph slip from his fingers and vanish beneath the surface. The hum deepened into a single long note that seemed to stretch time itself. The lights overhead flickered once, twice, and then went out.
When they came back, the chamber was empty, the water gone, the car gone, the box gone. Tom stood alone on the damp floor, the black envelope still in his hand, but when he looked inside it was empty. The tunnel behind him was silent. The air still. He climbed the stairs back into the warehouse, the fog thinner now, the first light of dawn bleeding through the broken windows.
Outside the shipyard gate stood the perfect car, waiting, its headlights off, its engine silent, the driver's seat empty. Tom walked toward it, his steps slow, the cold morning air filling his lungs. He opened the door and sat behind the wheel, the leather warm as if someone had just left it. He placed his hands on the wheel and without thinking turned the key. The engine purred to life, smooth and steady, the road ahead swallowed by the last of the fog. He pressed the accelerator and the car rolled forward, leaving the shipyard behind, the hum filling the air around him. The date, August 23rd, 1974, echoing in his mind as the town disappeared in the rearview mirror, and the fog closed in once more.